as a fellow lawyer, not fellow to me, but fellow to Mukundan,
Yeah.
um, how did this make you feel, man?
Oh man, like I'm glad they had the disclaimer at the start of the movie saying this is not like casting aspersions on the legal fraternity, because this is basically Mukundan Unni represents all of the worst things that a lawyer can be. Like ambulance chasing lawyers are considered like the bottom of the heap, lowest level
Well,
respect for any lawyers. They basically just try and rot the system and commit some kind of insurance fraud. Not all of them, but like that's the perception of them. And then this guy just has that terrible kind of stereotype of willing to do anything to succeed, right? The kind of stereotypes you see in Boston Legal and Suits and all of those, but just taken to a level that is just horrendous. Like he becomes a terrible man throughout this whole process. But look, it's accurate in that it portrays some of the boring aspects of the legal profession, all the paperwork and all of that. That is like half of the job. And this film doesn't shy away from that. So I respect that they genuinely capture some of the boring elements of the legal profession. It's not all sexy courtroom drama. But dude,
yeah.
this I hope people do not think that this is some guy to idolize or this represents most of the legal profession, because it absolutely does not.
Hey, man, you mentioned a term there I want to ask you about. You said hospital chasing lawyers. This is a thing? Like, there's actually people that do this?
Chases, yeah. And I don't know like what the limit is to that, but the perception is when people get injured, they're literally just lawyers going into hospitals to try and file medical claims to get money for the client and for them as well through some sort of commission situation. So it is an actual thing that happens. Personal injury lawyers, essentially, they're the ones you see most advertised on television. And look, not all of them are shady like this guy, but it is a profession. You know, it's the thing that you think of when I fall on a pavement because there's a crack there. The person is thinking, who can I sue? And there'll be a lawyer who's willing to take up their case, right? And sue whoever they can to try and get you money because you had a fall somewhere. So it's probably like the least glorious part of the legal profession, the least respected part. But look, there are people who have legitimate injuries because of negligence of other people. You know, they get in car accidents that shouldn't have happened. So there's a legitimate purpose behind their work, but there's also people who apparently exploit the system too.
Wow. This is, I mean, like, I would have thought that this would be the case, but I never had really thought about it or seen any movie or any book, any portrayal of a character doing this, to be honest. Like, I mean, I've seen a ton of movies about dodgy lawyers, and I mean, geez, this guy gives away, James McGill or Better Call Saul
vibes.
Impersonation.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, he's a character that I thought of during this movie almost straight away. I was like, yeah, this guy will fit right in. But I hadn't seen anyone particularly, like, any movie or character I could think of.
No, because it's not a sexy part of the law, and it's not like a highly respectable version of the law. And the legal profession's portrayed in any way, in a good way, it's usually someone fighting for some civil rights cause, taking on the case of someone who's unfortunate and has been beaten down by the system, like fighting a big government organization because there's a conspiracy and taking the fight to them through their diligence and hard work. It's not really the story of personal injury lawyers. It's just not sexy, and it's not got the best rep either. So, and you can see from this film why.
Interesting, because, like, you know, we talked a little bit about a character or an actor we saw before, from Jana Ganamana, Suraj, who was fantastic in this. But like in Jana Ganamana, right, that is very like flamboyant and like it's almost
that's right. That's like peak opposite, lawyer, right? Yeah. That's what you want your lawyers to be.
Yeah, that is the kind of lawyer you idolize.
Yes.
I can't remember the character's name, but Prithvi Raj's character in that movie is a complete opposite of what Mukundan was doing.
Yes.
In this one. Yeah, but it's really interesting to hear that, man. Like, but you touched on about how the boring parts of the law. Do you think this movie did a good job of accurately presenting other things of the profession? Like the whole, you know, getting... Like there's some stuff he does that's extremely dodgy, like getting a guy's fingerprint. When he's unconscious, and like others, he just does a lot of dodgy stuff. Is this actually happened? Like, do you know?
I don't know of this happening, and it would be like incredibly illegal for stuff like that to happen. Yeah. It's not. You can't get someone's consent while they're passed out, right? So, like, I imagine this stuff is not happening routinely. This is like a very
Yeah,
extreme case. And this is part of the world that this film is building, which is a very negative portrayal of humanity
yes.
and the people in it, right? But look, I think there are elements of this that like tick the boxes in terms of process, right? Firstly, you need to get a client needs an advocate to start a legal matter, right? And that's what he's getting those fingerprints for, essentially saying, I will be your
Yeah.
advocate. So he takes the case forward. Then there's all the paperwork of filing things with insurance companies. You got to get your certificates that proving you're injured. You got to get certificates from the police saying there was a crash. And there's all of this stuff that underpins a legal claim before it can get to court and get resolved and a claim can be made. Or it doesn't get to court at all because the insurance company says, all right, we don't want to take this to court. It's clear we're in the wrong. And they settle out of court, right? So I think it does a good job of just like building the procedural kind of framework of the legal profession, and then obviously embellishes it by creating some absurd scenarios that Mukundan Unni finds himself in to win clients. But I think it doesn't shy away from that boring part. And one of the things it does really well is kind of make those boring parts a little bit interesting. And we can get into that later, but I think it does a good job of keeping what could be a really boring topic about how to make an insurance claim into something that is very watchable, which I found very surprising.
Yeah, no, the topic itself was really interesting. I mean, like, we'll touch on the character a little bit here, man. Mukundan Unni, man, like,
what a guy.
performance was fantastic by this guy. And I want to talk to you a little bit about him later, about a little bit more about this guy, Vineeth Sreenivasan. He was fantastic, but just the character himself, man, like, my God, this guy is despicable.
Diabolical,
he was
man.
a real slimeball, and he really just he stays committed to how. I mean, he isn't so committed; he gets worse and worse.
He gets worse and worse, and gets rewarded for worse and worse. Like that's the amazing part. Yeah.
No, that is really interesting. But like, I mean, we'll touch on sort of his character, but I do think this movie starts off almost lighthearted. To be honest, it's almost
totally
it's definitely the first half is straight up. I felt at times it was almost like a straight up comedy. Like it starts off with him with a ridiculous motivation. Like I found that to be hilarious. He wants to be successful before he's 30, so he's changing his.
So he stayed 30 for the last 6 years, according to his identification card. Yeah.
Until it's finally showing on his face, and he has to do or die. Like
he's got 1 year to turn it around.
Yeah, to do anything to be successful. The pressure that's on him to sort of get there, but yeah, man, like it was a really interesting performance. I really liked how it took it from, it starts off as somewhat. You can almost excuse him, be like, all right, he's just a bit childish, to really learning more about the character and how bad he can actually be, and really, he's a psychopath, and there's almost something wrong with him. Yeah, man. Did you like? What did you think about this character? How did it make you feel while watching him? Did you enjoy that progression, or
Dude, like I think this film was challenging to me because of the lead character and the message that it held. Right. For me, like one of the things I take for granted is that your main character starts off as a fundamentally likable person. And usually they go through a journey and they become a better person by the end of it. It's like most stories are some sort of hero's journey, right? This is like the complete opposite. This is like the villain's journey, and he doesn't become better. He becomes worse. And yet, like part of you is like, you kind of want him to not get caught. But then another part of you is like, I hope this guy gets caught. And it's just like a constant conflict the entire time. When it gets to what he does at the very end with like the school kids college kids, like that's when you completely turn on him. But for the most part of this film, you're kind of like, I want him to get caught, but also I want to see where this goes. So you have this conflicting emotion. But I mean, I found it really challenging to think about this character because he represents everything that I find like despicable in the legal profession as well as the people and humanity as a whole, right? And so this film breaks a cardinal rule by making its protagonist unlikable. Like how many films do that? Your main character is an unlikable guy. And what's worse, he never gets his comeuppance. The karma never comes to get him. There is no overarching sense of justice in this world. And he beats all of his opposition. And not only does he beat the opposition, fate intervenes to like put good luck on his side when he most needs it. And I found that like so challenging to watch because I was furious for part of this film. And then other times, you're right, first half, you're kind of like laughing because, he starts off as this bumbling fool and progresses into this like genius guy. But look, I think one of the great things this film did was somehow make this unlikable character so compelling and watchable, man. And I think they did this through a couple of different ways, but just the performance is one main way that they managed to do this. Just the contrast in this actor's face between what his face is saying and what's going in his head is never stops being hilarious because his face never changes. But in his head, he's like thinking, maybe I should kill this person. And you're like, what? What an extreme response to this situation. But anyway, we'll get up to the flaws later. But I found this character really troubling, man. And it made me surprised the way this film went and how unrelenting it was in creating this very dark world.
Yeah, no, this movie at times was uncomfortable. Like, it honestly was. It was uncomfortable because you're seeing he's not even like, when you sort of think of traditional, lead characters or whatever, it's either, as you said, the protagonist who goes on the hero's journey and finds himself, or you have your anti-villain who's kind of not anti-villain, sorry, anti-villain that's kind of anti-hero, sorry. Yeah, anti-hero who's kind of like good but has bad but has good qualities, so you can't put him in place.
Precisely, yes.
Or if you have an antagonist, they're just somebody that's on the other side of the protagonist to balance him off. There's no protagonist in this movie. There's only an antagonist.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
There's an antagonist and there's the side characters around him, basically, who just sort of who have parts to play in his sort of, I guess his scheme and his development.
Yes.
It's interesting. There is character development in this, but it's very different. Like, it's not with the character development that we normally associate with, how he's learned from his mistakes. He's actually just becoming worse and worse. And as you said, fate even intervenes at the time when it needs to. So it was pretty fascinating to see this. And it's a really unique take that I've not seen. Honestly, I can't think of too many examples of this. Like, it's straight up, you're following a villain the whole time. But he doesn't, you don't start the movie off thinking he's a villain. It's not like start the movie off with him killing somebody or him committing a crime.
It's a gradual progression.
Yeah, you think of him. Actually, you almost find him a bit, endearing. That he's just, he's not well-to-do. He wants to do better in his profession. He's trying his best. He's innocent. Part of this is the way he looks. He looks like a very innocent guy, right? He doesn't look like
that's right. Unassuming guy. No, and he comes across as kind of like a bumbling fool, right? When he first makes that suggestion to, is it the politician's husband about putting two judgments inside the laptop of the judge and getting the judge found out, like, you think he's being ridiculous and the guy thinks he's being ridiculous and you kind of fob him off because he comes across as not a very confident man. He's kind of hunched over a little bit. He's wearing all white. Like, he doesn't fill you with confidence. And by the end of the film, that's exactly the ploy that is used and is successful. So obviously he's very smart. He just hasn't had a lucky break yet, capitalize on all of his intelligence. And so you kind of sympathize with him because he quotes those 4 characteristics of success: hard work, perseverance, dedication, discipline. And something else. Yeah, and discipline. And he's obviously done all of that and it hasn't worked. So he's like, all right, now I'm changing it up and I've got 1 year to do whatever it takes to be successful. And I'm going all in on that.
Yeah, you kind of, honestly, you kind of feel sympathetic towards him. Like, you feel like bad for him. You feel like he's desperate, but you don't want him to be like this. You want him to have his break.
Yes, that's right.
Until you find out sort of later on. But it's so well done. We can move on to sort of the story and the pacing and stuff like that. And some of the elements they use I want to touch on as well, because they did a lot of clever things here.
Yes.
But, we see him gradually become worse and worse. And it's done in a way that it's just sort of lures you in. Like, I don't know what exact point it was where I was like, I'm really starting to hate this guy. But
it's probably, good point. I can pinpoint it.
Like, I think probably the most obvious one would have been the bus scene when he wants to kill,
of course,
those kids or whatever it is. But even before, he's like, he murders somebody. Like, he
murders his advocate, his opponent. Sorry, his competitor.
He murders his competitor. He gets him like barred or something like that, or like he dismisses him. Destroys his reputation. He trains a snake. Like, he's
out of control.
Insane.
I think one of the ways that maybe the progression, like, you don't really notice it, is that we are constantly hearing his inner voice, right? And so we are seeing the world a little bit through his own lens, and you can't help but kind of see the world through that lens. You know it's ridiculous, but you know what's going on in his head and how he sees the world, so you kind of understand it a little bit, even though, like, objectively, you know he's being a complete madman and being completely evil. I think the fact that you just continually hear his monologue just means you almost do kind of see the world from his perspective, and so you don't really notice until he does some of the extreme things just how far gone he is and how corrupt he is.
One thing I wanted to mention about that, so, that was it's a pretty interesting, device that they used, the whole murmuring inside the head and consistently talking. It reminded me a little bit of American Psycho. That's the only movie that I could remember that does that throughout the whole movie. And this is probably Malayalam Psycho. Or Kerala Psycho. I'm not sure which one.
Psycho.
But man, he was so that murmuring, it did one thing for me. Like at the start, again, to just touch on your progression and relationship with the character. At the start, you find it endearing. And I was like, okay, cool. You're hearing his thoughts. They're kind of innocent, but they're kind of silly. They're pretty funny. He's always got a dark, he obviously likes dark humor, and that's his output on life because what he's gone through. Later on, it got to a point where it was getting annoying. Like, I was like, I'm just getting annoyed by this. Like, I don't actually enjoy this. But then I thought about this for a while, and I was like, you know what? Maybe that's a point of this. Like, it's a point. Like, you're not meant to like this character. And the more he does it, the more you dislike him. So it just leads to like a frustrating character where I'm sure I can't be the only one, and I'm sure you're on the same boat. Like, we wanted to see this guy get like slapped in the face,
100%.
Or, take a punch or take a fall, or there's even a point where there's a point where he gets a stamps, like he fakes a stamp and it's wrong, and you think, how can you get away with this?
That's and right.
He still does
somehow. Somehow the judge gets caught about the laptop thing. It's
So
I mean,
but how about you, man? You touched on it a bit, but like that murmuring inside the head. Do you agree that that was a reason for it, and did it annoy you at some points?
I think it stopped being an effective tool when his actions just got so far gone and so far beyond the realm of reasonableness that I stopped sympathizing with him, and it just I felt like, okay, nothing he says could make me think that this was a reasonable thing to do, to kill your competitor or to profit from the fact that university students have been hit in a car crash. When he does the stuff in the hospital about turning off the power generators, putting water in the ambulance so they can't be transferred to another hospital, like the murmuring, I didn't want to hear what he was saying because it was clear as day to me that this guy has just become evil now. And like, you didn't need all of that inner dialogue to explain it, because we kind of know him well enough now that there's only one reason he's doing this, and that is so he could just become the big player in this insurance fraud kind of landscape, right? Yeah. So after a point, it stopped being valuable as a way to try and understand this guy. And it wasn't even funny towards the end, right? Because he's basically very single-minded in what he wants to achieve. He just wants basically domination of his field. And the comedic elements are less there towards the end, or they provide less of a counterbalance to his craziness, I think. Whereas in the first half, it's funny enough that you're like, just can distance yourself a little bit from what he's doing and can laugh at it a little bit. But in the dialogue and the comedy ceases to be a useful way to generate sympathy or understand his motivations towards the end.
Yeah, I think at the start, it almost catches you off guard because you just don't expect... You just don't expect to hear that consistently going on and on. So that's why at the start you're like, okay, this is funny. And I think they use it honestly brilliantly to their advantage, because it gets to the point like, you're meant to hate this character, not just for what he's doing, but you're in his mind now. So you're going to suffer with the whole thing the whole way through. And I love how this movie, in terms of like all Malayalam movies, their commitment always seems like it's always just all the way. They don't seem to half step or anything like that. They just they went all the way with this. It was fantastic, I thought.
Man, the commitment to this is just unbelievably, like, it's 100% the uncompromising vision of this world. Yeah. Because you have Mukundan Unni, who obviously succeeds in literally every element of his plan and gets to a position where he literally owns the hospital, the guards contract, and will get every insurance claim that walks into that hospital. So he has been successful in a way that is completely inconceivable. And he's beaten all of his opponents, the judge, his advocate, competitor, and the police guy who's kind of after him. But not only is it that he succeeded, the people around him who are even somewhat nice, they all fail, right? His advocate peer, that the girlfriend at the start, advocate Jyoti, Like she
Jyoti.
kind of, she's kind of rising up the ranks and she's about to get married, and then she loses a case and her fiance leaves her. So she's back at square one. The owner of the hospital, his son, who's like the good doctor guy, he's
Yes,
trying to
yes.
keep Mukundan Unni in check and not get him to corrupt the hospital system. He loses out because Mukundan Unni eventually gets control of the entire hospital.
Yeah.
And then you have, who else is it? Even his colleague, Robin, his
Yes.
sidekick,
Gets
right?
killed.
He gets killed. Like the guy who starts off innocent becomes slightly corrupt, and as he's trying to come into his own and stand up to Mukundan, he dies.
Yeah.
And so it's just an unrelenting vision, right? Not only does Mukundan succeed, it's everyone who had a shred of decency has failed. And it's like
Yeah.
a complete victory for the evil team. And the good people have like lost entirely. I've never seen anything like that. There's nothing
No.
positive in this world to hold on to.
No.
And it also just kind of shows you all the people that are involved in Mukundan Unni's like success are ordinary people who have bought into this corrupt system, right? It's the person who gets injured and goes into hospital who
Yeah.
opportunistically realizes they can commit fraud and get some money out of it. It's the ambulance drivers who decide to also profit from this situation by calling him first to get the
Yes.
insurance claim, right? It's the doctors who are willing to sign fake certificates. Like all of the corrupt people kind of succeed in this,
Yeah.
and the people who try to do the right thing lose. And it's
Yeah.
so uncompromising, man. Like I've never
Definitely.
seen that happen before. Like good
No.
guys comprehensively lose out here.
Yeah. I think that's one point I wanted to sort of bring up. I think this movie tries to be really realistic in some ways. Like
Yeah.
it's uncomfortable, but there's one line that very interesting character which I would have liked to know more about. Meenakshi, she sort of
Yes.
his wife at the end. uh,
Yeah.
he sort of mentioned something like like what do you think all the people that are successful are just hardworking, dedicated, have discipline? No, there's something else to that, and sometimes it's this, you know.
Yes.
And it doesn't shy away from that. That is the truth. Like
No.
there are corrupt politicians and they've done bad things and they've got away with it.
And
You
they
know,
get away with it.
as
That's
much
right.
as we want to believe in karma or like things will come back to them, sometimes it
Yeah.
just doesn't happen like that. You know? So
It's
this
a
movie is a great
yeah.
commentary on that. Like it's like this is the reality. And I'm sure like, knowing a little bit about India, like corruption in politics is it's very, very common there. It's common everywhere, but it's just I think in countries, third world countries in general, it's really there a lot more. So this movie doesn't shy away from that at all. And it's just, I think it plays to the point you were talking about. Like everyone that is corrupt gets away with it in some way or the other. But
Yeah.
yeah, and everyone that's even trying to do good or just in like even innocent, like Advocate Jyoti,
Yeah. Oh yeah,
this sort
good
of
point.
falls apart. Like there's nothing there.
And that's
Yeah,
what's
it's
uncomfortable about this film, man.
yeah,
It makes you question those things you take for granted, that if you do the
correct.
right thing, good things will happen. And if you do bad things will come to you eventually.
Yep,
Like it kind of pulls out that very comforting belief from
yep,
under your feet and leaves you with this guy who will never get what's coming to him and will succeed endlessly because of his own ruthlessness. And
yeah, yeah,
what a scary way to think about the world, right? Like, because if
definitely,
everyone
man.
acted like Mukundan Unni, and what does he have? He says there are two types of people in the world: the ones who get exploited and the ones who do the
Yes,
exploiting. And he wants to be the latter. Like,
yeah, yeah,
what a philosophy!
yeah,
What would the
yeah,
world look like if everyone adopted that philosophy? It's a scary thought for me, man, and one of the most uncomfortable things watching this film.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Watching this film makes you engage with that question.
Definitely. Here's another line or something like that. Like it's better to die than to fail or something like that. Like
Yes, yeah. That's dude
sort of
extreme.
leans into how crazy this dude is. And it's like I like it because they show elements of this at the start, but then later on it becomes much, much more. Especially when he starts
Yeah,
hallucinating and starts seeing
yeah,
Advocate Venu. But when you were talking about all the stuff that happens, this movie is packed. This movie goes through so much. Like the journey he also like that part about it. You really do feel that there's a journey that this character goes on, right? We see his struggle at
yes,
the start. We see how
yeah,
difficult for it is. Like they have a good way of showing that. Like I think it's going to like um, they show how many days are passing and he's just waiting for a hospital to come. When he
yes,
finally gets his break, then the other guy comes before him, and then
yes.
so we sort of see him struggle and until he finally he gets a break and then he takes over.
Yes.
But then you see his journey as he gets even
Yeah.
worse and worse. And because he's so petty and so vain, like even the
Yes.
smallest thing gets him to, it's like he uses that as motivation over and over again.
Yes.
Like he hears about
Yes.
I think Robin starts dressing up really well, and he's like,
Yes.
this is not good.
This is
He
not a good.
hears
Yeah. Yeah.
he hears about Dorothy getting married. He gets upset about that. Like he
Yes.
uses every single little thing to go to the extreme.
Petty man. Yes.
Yeah, petty, vain, really disturbing character, man. If you think about it, like it's one of the most disturbing characters I've ever seen. Like it's, I can't remember too many instances like this. This guy, one of the most hated characters ever.
And can I note that one of the things that make him a little bit scary is the fact that there's probably elements of this we can all relate to a little bit.
Yeah,
Because which of us have felt like we deserve success and haven't got it for some bad
yeah,
reason? We've worked hard all of our lives and we haven't got the break. And we can all probably agree that, when our friends tell us they've been super successful, a part of us is like a
mm,
little bit jealous that, how did they get
yes,
that and not me? Why didn't I get that lucky break? I deserve
yep,
this as much as them. And so, like, you can kind of understand his feelings at the start. Obviously, he just then takes that into another extreme and goes, well, now I have only one option, and that's to go extreme. And even if we have negative thoughts, we would never act on them. Whereas this
yeah,
guy just has no filter in the end. He just
yeah,
decides, okay, if I need to kill this person, that's what's going to happen. Like
yeah,
there's a little bit of us in his character, but it is just ramped up to like 100, such that
yeah,
it's not relatable anymore. But there's enough there that you're kind of like a bit terrified that
yeah.
there's some parallels between you and him.
Definitely no. He's a very unbalanced character, but there are because I think the movie starts off with a really good line. It says something like, "Most people are shades of grey,"
Yes,
which means they're somewhere in between. They don't go,
yes,
to the extreme. And from what
accurate.
movies we've seen, a lot of the characters that we've seen are in the white. Like they're
Yeah,
saints. They're really good. They're superheroes. They
yes,
they for humanity, Captain America types. But this movie
yeah,
goes the other end, and he says some people are just black, and that's
that's
what
it.
he is. Like,
It's
and
as
that's
simple as
completely.
that.
There's
Yeah,
no shades of grey for him. Like for him, the only thing he has to do is be successful by 30. you
yeah,
know, um, that's his only motivation. That's the only thing he cares about. Which is he is a psychopath at the end of the day.
yes,
Like
hundred
if
percent.
that's your only motivation, it's not about money. It's not about fame. It's just about being successful, which I guess that is part of. Um,
Yes,
but yeah, man, it was really fascinating to see this man. Really,
and
really
you're talking
brutal.
about the progression of his character, right? Even when he becomes successful, I think what makes the movie interesting is his victory. Like, it takes time for him to win. Like, he has
Yeah,
obstacles in his way. Firstly, it's the competitor guy who is trying to get the cases from him. He eventually finds a way to get rid of him through a snake, right?
yeah,
Then there's the judge who figures out that he's forged the stamp, and suddenly there's this new obstacle, and he doesn't know a way around it. And he's thinking about committing suicide, and then fate intervenes there, and
yeah.
something happens. And finally, there's the cop who's after him, who
Yes, yes,
who wants to catch him, who's got all the evidence, and then because of the judge thing, there's no more evidence for the cop
yeah,
to use, and the cop gets transferred somewhere else. So there are obstacles along the way that he has to clear. So he doesn't always make the right calls, but things go in his favor, or he's able to fix up the wrong calls later on. Because like the security contract thing, he originally doesn't think it's a great idea when
no,
that advocate Venu guy comes and talks to him, and then later on he's like, "Oh, actually, I need to sort this out," and he takes care of it and
yeah.
becomes the owner of the security contract for the hospital. So I think there are enough obstacles here that you kind of are interested in the story the entire time, and you
Yeah.
can kind of distance yourself from the fact that he's doing all these horrendous things a little bit.
Yeah, no, there's a journey for every single thing he has to do, right? Like you even feel like actually thinking about that back to Advocate Venu again, right? Like he actually came to him as like an olive leaf, like, hey,
Yes,
why don't we work together and just do everything?
yes.
And he doesn't even listen to him. And then when he answers
No.
back, he says something like, I'll cut you up or
Oh, he
um
says something intense, like
yeah,
scary.
he's
Yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
bad.
And he has a
So sort
like
of
knife while he's talking.
yes.
And it's something
Yeah.
freaky, dude. Yeah.
So I think yeah, it's definitely a bit of foreshadowing because at that point you're not like this guy's crazy, like he's not going to kill anybody, but then he does it like the next thing. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, so he really is. Yeah, each of the things is like each is an obstacle, and they show that really well. Like nothing
Yeah.
is definitely the opposite of like a Mary Sue or anything like that. Like nothing
Yeah.
happens easily for him. Like everything is a
No, that's
struggle.
right.
Even towards the
Yeah.
end, right? He has a court case against Jyoti.
Yeah.
and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'm screwed now." And he does that dodgy stuff, and then he gets out of
Yes.
that. Even at the end with the what's it called, with the students in the bus,
Yes.
he's so crazy that he's not even satisfied with like 30 people. One of them
Yep.
passed away. He wants 31 with a
He
dead
wants.
person
That's right.
for the insurance. Oh man, like
This
it
guy is.
is like
He
at a
is
level that's insane. Like
unbelievable. He is unempathetic. He can't understand the plight of other people. Like, he's a psychopath or a sociopath at this
yeah,
point. Like,
yeah,
there's no question about it. He's not kind of motivated by anything other than his own success, and he does not have any sympathy for anyone else. Like, he essentially marries his wife to spite the doctor guy, right? The other
yes,
doctor guy, because he wants
yeah,
to take her away from him because he's interested in her as well. Like, this
yeah,
guy has close to no human emotions at all, other than the most base and vain desire to
yeah,
be better than everyone else and succeed at all costs.
definitely, man. It was extremely uncomfortable at times, but honestly, I was on the ride the whole time. Like,
Me too,
you know,
dude. Me too.
I do want to ask you though. I did. There's one point which I found it started to get a little bit predictable. I think
Yep.
at some points, I think I started to get because I was watching with my wife, and she was saying stuff like, "Okay, what's he gonna do now? Kill himself?" The next scene, he tries
It's
to kill
like,
himself. Like,
yes,
I could
yes,
see this happening a few times. Like, all right, I'm understanding what he's doing. The thing
yep,
that kind of saves it for me in that sense was that little twist when he didn't die.
yes, yes.
I think
And yes,
that's what you would have probably expected, like him to sort of just die and then be like, we all feel happy, like, okay, yes,
yes,
he's gone. Like that's what we all wanted him.
yes,
But
yes.
obviously, this movie is not that movie. It's not going
No,
to do that for us.
it's not going to relent. It's going to stick to the theme that knows the
Yeah,
message.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, look, I
Um,
found some of this a little bit predictable as well. I think I was just kind of hoping against all hope that there would be a
yeah,
happy ending to this. I was just like, surely they can't let this guy win. There's got to be something that happens. And
yeah,
that's what I was kind of holding out for. But there are little bits throughout the movie where you kind of know what's going to happen. When he buys that new car, the kind of salesman says there's only airbags in the front seat. I'm like,
yes,
I feel like that's going to come into play at some
back,
point, and
yeah,
it does. So there are predictable elements, but I think the biggest twist in this is that he doesn't get what's coming
yes,
to him, and it's just 100% committed to that message. So yeah,
definitely. No, definitely, man. I think we should probably talk a little bit about the sort of surrounding cast before we move on,
yes, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
this was also, as great as he was, and he was fantastic. Like the
it's
performances
terrific.
around him, and the
Yes,
characters that they built around him. Yeah,
terrific.
absolutely love them. I think it's so important in a film like this where it's all about dialogue. It's all about sort of short little instances that happen. There's nothing really extravagant except for one or two scenes
No,
here and there. Most
yeah,
of it's just talking, right? Like a lot of it's just talking and him talking to himself. But you know, um, like we got Advocate Venu played by our good friend Suraj when
yeah.
you're
Can I
Modu.
say that I
Yeah.
think he was like maybe the standout actor aside from
Oh yeah.
Vineeth Sreenivasan, because there's something about him. He's also a shady lawyer, but he feels like an
Yeah.
inherently better person
Yes.
than
Yes.
Mukundan Unni. Like, it feels like he has some boundaries, and while
Yeah.
he's cheating the system, he doesn't feel quite as bad as this guy. And I feel
Yeah.
like he's the first guy who realizes Mukundan Unni is a bit of a dangerous guy,
Yeah.
because he kind of tells him the entire process without realizing Mukundan Unni's a
Yeah.
lawyer, and then he's like, "Oh no, I've just given away my trade secrets," essentially.
Yeah.
But he recognizes that he's a dangerous adversary, I think. And
Mhm.
I just feel like he was a very relatable guy, in that he was
Oh,
genuinely grey. Like, he wasn't a good man, but he had his limits. Whereas Mukundan Unni had no limits, right? Even the kind of cronies around him, they were uncomfortable by the lengths he would go
yeah.
to get, the client's signature and stuff, right? He would wait outside the morgue with the family that had just lost someone and try and convince them to sign a certificate. Like, you get the feeling that those kind of things Advocate Venu and his colleagues would not do. So,
Yeah.
like, I feel like he was a good counterbalance to Mukundan Unni in terms of,
Yeah.
you can be shady but grey and not completely black. And he had that vulnerability to him. So I thought, like, he was a terrific character, man.
Yeah, I thought he was great, and he probably is somewhat more of sort of the You sort of mentioned at the start some of the ambulance chasing lawyers.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
probably is a more accurate representation of
Yes.
what they are like.
Yes.
He's sort of just there. He gets his stuff done, and he lives his life, and he accepts it. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's it.
Like,
And he was like, yeah, great in the role. Very charming. He's obviously a very versatile actor. Like, geez, this
he's
guy can
terrific, man.
um, do a lot. But I thought his character was great. Advocate Robin. Sort of sad to see his journey, but
That was a
you know,
tragic arc, man. Yeah.
yeah, pretty tragic. Yeah, he was probably the most tragic character because I was surprised as to why he was sticking around so long
Yeah.
with this guy. But I think I don't know, were they friends from before or something like that?
Yeah, I couldn't kind of understand how they got to know each other, but he kind of
Mm.
just, I think, is not as strong-willed as Mukundan Unni, and
Yeah,
Mukundan Unni just makes stuff happen. So he kind of just follows him along, and slowly his own sense of morality gets corrupted. And like
yeah,
that's the really sad part to see, I think. And
that's right.
like he never gets the respect he's deserved, and like he's treated pretty badly by Mukundan Unni. So, and at the end of the
Yeah, yeah,
day, he dies at the first time he attempts to stand up for himself.
yeah.
Like it's a pretty sad arc, but that character is so great at portraying
Oh yeah.
vulnerability and just like yeah, you kind of are that character, I think, as the audience.
Oh
You're kind
yeah.
of watching things happen and you kind of feel a little bit
Yes.
complicit because you know what's going on inside Mukundan's head, but you're always a bit uncomfortable by it. And yeah, I thought that performance was really empathetic and terrific.
Yeah. Yeah, and his downfall was at the worst time, right? After
Yeah,
he's sort
yeah.
of getting engaged and he sort of has a chance to make
Yes.
money and all this stuff, and then yeah,
Yes.
Mukununi, like I mean, like the death of Venu is much more planned out and seems like it's
Yes.
orchestrated. This guy, he's just
Yes.
like at that point in his life, he's just like, I'm gonna kill anybody at a moment. Like he didn't expect to see Robin
Yes.
come into the car, and he just made the
No.
decision on the spot. I'm gonna kill him.
Was
Like
it that is
yeah,
true
just
psychopath, man.
yeah, he's just gone complete crazy. Yeah, I also want to talk about this character Minakshi. I thought she was fantastic. I didn't understand her at all,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and what her motivations were. But yeah, she I don't know provided kind of I guess comedic relief in some of the stuff she did.
Yeah.
And
I thought like it was really interesting with her. Like, firstly, she starts off as kind of comedic relief and just a bit of banter and flirting
yeah, yeah,
with him, the main character. But then you kind of understand her view of the world because she's like, my goal is to never work again, and just lays
yes,
around.
yeah,
And so she makes the call: who am I going to marry? The doctor who's trying to run a good ship and do the right
uh,
thing, or the guy who might make me a lot of money and whose
yeah,
interests will compound over time? I'm going
uh,
to go and hitch my bag into that guy. And so
yeah,
she's obviously very shrewd and calculating as well in terms of kind of supporting him and getting him the cases, but also just being like, this is this guy will
no,
provide me the life that I want. So like a really
definitely,
interesting character, man. Someone who comes
yeah,
across as very sweet, but also very like calculated in her own way as well.
definitely. And there's like I think with her, there's shades of him in her
Yes,
that I saw.
totally.
Right?
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
That's what I
yeah.
got. It's like, all right, there's somewhat these two are,
Match made in heaven, these two.
working well
Oh
together.
hell yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, much made in hell. But they're kind of working well together because of that similarity, and
Yes.
there is something.
Yes.
Obviously, Mukunoni is psychopath, so
On another level. Yeah.
he's just doing it for one reason,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that's to piss off the doctor.
Yeah.
But there is some elements of him in her. So yeah, I thought
Yes.
sounding cast were fantastic.
Terrific, man. And I
Yeah,
also
man.
really like that there were characters, and I've kind of touched on this before, that have a different worldview to Mugun than Ani. Like,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
all we had heard was just that this world is completely evil and there's nowhere else to be other than
yeah,
no other way to act than to exploit people, that would have been a very one-dimensional movie. I like
yeah,
that you had people like Advocate Jodhi and other people who are trying to do the right thing, and they're not all kind of self-interested, unmotivated people. Sure, that doesn't get rewarded, but at least it was good to have different perspectives and not just
yeah.
all characters who are completely grey and unlikable and black, essentially.
Yeah, it's interesting when what do you think of the hallucination of Vinny?
Yeah,
Like
it's
what
an
was he meant to
interesting
represent?
one. It's a good question because
Yeah,
it's not like Mukundan feels any guilt towards what he did. So it's not like the
no,
conscience of him coming
no.
out and like trying to tell him the error of his ways. I felt like partly it was just comedic relief because they had good banter
Mm,
with each other in those
yeah,
scenes, but um I don't know, maybe it was him thinking, what would Advocate Benu do in this situation?
yeah,
And trying to think about kind of how to address an obstacle he's facing. But I think it was a great way to for like Advocate Benu and the actor to kind of portray
yeah,
their like other elements to their personality and be quite funny.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. What about you, man? What did you
I
think
think
was
as you were saying that, maybe it might have just been because, like, look, he's not the guilty conscience or anything like that. He's not like
yeah,
the the angel on the
no,
side. He might have been the
no,
devil on the side. He might have
yes,
been the guy that's actually, Mukundan has actually turned him into someone that motivates him because he has nobody external that
No, that's right.
motivates him or pushes him to do what he's doing. It's
Good
all
point. Good
internalized.
point.
So
Yes.
when he dies, he doesn't become. It's not a guilty conscience, or it's not like he's
Yes.
feeling bad about the situation. He's just turning that
Yes.
to his own advantage, and
Yes.
having a dialogue with somebody. So that
Yeah.
could be one thing. I think that's what they were trying to do with
Yeah.
that.
That makes sense.
But yeah, I mean, it was also great because I just enjoyed seeing that character, that actor,
100%. Yeah.
continue
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Because like when he died, I was like, oh man, just we didn't get
That's
half a
it.
movie with Suraj. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to see more of him. That was great. Yeah, it's a fantastic performance from everybody. I think we'll move on now to sort of a new section, man. A new section if you're hoping to sort of continue on. We're going to call it Ken's Corner. So special shout out to our good friend and who's you've heard his name before on this podcast, Ken. He helps us out every now and then with choosing movies, and I'm pretty sure he helped us with this one as well. So thank you, Ken. And
Thank
here's
you,
some
Ken.
trivia, man. I want to get your reactions to some of these things, man.
Let's do it.
Because yeah, some of this stuff surprised me, man. To the actor Vineeth Sreenivasan, this guy is not just an actor; he's a singer, a music director, a writer, a director, and producer.
What? That is amazing.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Man, there's
He's
some talented people out there.
we've sort of said this in other movies. Like we're so surprised by like these actors being able to dance
How
into movies.
versatile. Yeah.
They're so really versatile. Like this guy, music director, actor, writer, director. So he's directed movies, he's produced movies, he's written movies, and he's obviously
amazing,
a
man.
talented actor.
100%. Like if you just told me he's a talented actor, that's enough. Like that is,
Yeah.
he's already his performance is already amazing. To know that he has so many other skills, I'm jealous, man. Far out.
Yeah,
One
this guy's
impressive dude.
definitely, man. Like that's really impressive. Apparently he's also, from what Ken's told me, he's meant to be more sort of a softer character. So he's played in a lot of sort of feel-good movies, from what I understand.
Wow.
Family-oriented movies.
I can see that though, because his face is completely like likable and innocent and naive, right? And that's probably what makes the contrast of what's going in his head so funny at times and stark and shocking.
Yeah. No, you could definitely be in movies as sort of like a like a jolly uncle or like a good friend or something like that.
Yeah. I can see.
Or even like a father figure he could play. Like he could do all those, but in this sense, I mean, it's a shock because we're not familiar with this actor, but like when you see something like that, it'd be like, this guy's taking on a completely different role.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah, man, it's pretty impressive. So, and like Suraj, right? We talked about how versatile he is.
True.
From the two movies we've seen of him, it's obviously something these guys can. It's not so in Hollywood. I think we have very it's almost like roles almost typecast, except for a few actors here and there or actresses here and there. Yeah. You're an action star. You're in horror movies. You're a comedian.
Yeah.
So we don't see them, but it looks like in Malayalam movies, man, they sort of play all hats. They can sort of do anything.
Yeah, they take risks. Like that's amazing. Not just the film direction, but like the actors are willing to kind of go outside their comfort zone or what they're known for.
I think one other thing. So this director of this movie it's his debut movie.
Really?
So, yeah.
Director, such a polished piece, man.
I know.
Jeez.
Director Abhinav Nayak. So debut movie. He smashed it out of the park, man. To have this as your debut, oh my god, it's fantastic.
I mean, like, what a bold film to make as your first one, right? This relentlessly negative kind of unheard of. Like, this is the kind of film you make after 5 films, and the studio trusts you to go in your own direction, right? What a film to make off the bat.
Yeah. So speaking of that, actually, so apparently no one would take the role of this movie. So he approached a lot of actors to be like, "Hey, do you want to star in this movie?" And a lot of them turned it down because it was just too dark. It was just too dark for them to sort of do. So I think he had asked Avanish to come in at the start, and he said, "I'll do it if no one else does it." So no one else did it. So then he's like, "All right, I'll do it now." But really, no one else would take this kind of role because, man, I could imagine Suraj being the main character in this movie.
Yeah,
he could have taken that, right?
Yes. I mean, maybe you just needed someone who's kind of fresh-faced and kind of like naive-looking to make that contrast a bit more intense. But yeah, that is surprising, man.
Yeah.
No one wants to be associated with this evil character.
Maybe after years of sort of developing a sort of maybe a role potentially or something like that. We saw it a little bit in like Rorschach, right? We saw like Mammootty take on this crazy role, which I you'd probably do towards the end of your career. So maybe it's just something like actors don't want to do something like this in the middle of their prime of their
Yes.
career, something like that, because it's so experimental in some ways.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I can see
And
that,
getting
man.
some,
Like, you don't want
yeah,
to maybe take those risks when your career is on the upward trajectory, right?
yeah,
And kind of do something that ruins that
yes,
trajectory. But
yeah.
amazing.
And it is a bit of a risk, right? Like it's a debut movie. No
Yes.
one's heard of it. It's completely out of this world in what it's trying to do and what it's trying to portray.
Yes.
One small one, I'm not sure if you saw the Easter egg, but there was a message he got from somebody, and the message was from Basil Joseph. Does that name sound
Basil
familiar to you?
Joseph. That definitely sounds familiar to me. Is
The
it
director of Midnight
Thal-
Morale.
Oh, Mino Morale. Yeah, cool,
The
cool.
director. Yeah,
That
so
is
apparently
amazing.
I think he was involved with somehow with because he's a main actor and director or something like that from before. So he came on board to help out with obviously
Amazing.
debut movie man.
Yes.
But yeah, that were the main points, man. There were some issues around distribution and how it didn't get as much publicity as they'd hoped for.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
in India, man, it's weird. They only do this thing where it's like they do single show cinemas. So like it just plays one movie at one time. Like that's
As in, it'll only play it once. Or
yeah, so like they'll have a cinema and they'll just play like 4 movies a day. And they'll be like,
right.
one finishes, the next people come in. Like whereas,
Right.
multiplexes like ours, like here in Australia, it's like multiple cinemas. So I
Oh,
think
of
that's
course.
why.
Yeah, gotcha. Right.
Because Kerala, man, they're competing with like Hindi movies, Telugu movies, Tamil movies, Hollywood movies
Yeah.
potentially as well,
Yes.
and Kerala movies. So yeah, I'm pretty kind of ashamed because I think this movie did do decently, like to make money back, but
Yeah.
I think it didn't make as much as they probably had hoped for. Because yeah, I mean, even judging from the movies we've seen, this is
Yeah.
pretty high up there, like such a
This
unique
is an amazing,
kind of movie.
unique experience. You're right.
Yeah. One point, man, which I wanted to sort of lead on to sort of exit the trivia is there is a sequel in the works apparently.
No. Really? Jesus.
Yeah,
What is that going to be about? Okay. All right.
Wow.
Okay.
So a sequel where he's already at this point when he's got everything. What do you think they're
Wow.
going to do next, man? Like, what do you think? Are they going to?
Where can you go from there? Like,
Yeah, I'm really.
surely it's only down. Like, surely he has to get his comeuppance at some point. But I just don't trust it.
Judging from this movie, it's probably just more upwards, right? And probably
just
more
upwards.
uncomfortable.
Like, he becomes the prime minister of India. Like, that is.
Maybe the other one they have to bring on as like an actual, competitor who's going to be there from start to finish.
Like a legitimate cat and mouse game where they are going at each other and you don't know who's going to win up. Yeah, that would be good.
Maybe a psychopath just on his level.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's an idea. Yeah.
Yeah, to sort of see who can one up the other, and it just gets so crazy with what they're trying to do.
And you would, as an audience, be in such a difficult position because you kind of would be barracking for one of them, right?
Yes.
Even though they're both terrible people. Like, that's hilarious.
You could definitely play the idea as who do you actually support here, like or who's actually worse of the two when they're both
who's the lesser of the two evils? Or, yeah.
That's really fascinating. I'm really interested to see what they do.
I'm down for
with
it.
the sequel. Oh, definitely no. I'm definitely up for a sequel to this movie because I enjoyed this one so much. And yeah, if it's with the same cast, well, I don't know if Suraj will be around because he's a spirit now. But the others, yeah, look, I'd be more than happy to see Vineeth. More than happy to see, Meenakshi, Aisha.
Yes.
Play her role. Whoever else is around, maybe they'll bring Jyoti.
Jyoti back. Maybe she goes evil. She's like, all right, no karma. I'm gonna go ham on this.
Yeah. She realizes the wrongs in her ways. But yeah, that's fascinating, right? I'd be really interested to see.
That is amazing.
Yeah, I think one other piece of trivia that I saw was it's based off a movie called Nightcrawler. Have you seen this movie?
The Jake Gyllenhaal one? No, I haven't.
Yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal movie. 2014.
Yeah,
no, I've not seen it.
That is another. Actually, that's probably a good comparison because that is, from what I'm aware, the story of another guy exploiting, the misery of human beings, basically for our own profit. I don't think it goes this far, but that was a film I didn't even dare watching because I didn't think that had any comedic elements to this. Like in the same way this had, right? So no, wasn't aware that that's like a comparative. It makes sense.
No, I think this by labeling this like a dark comedy, it sort of makes you just come into it more easy because it's like that comedy part. There's less barrier of entry because you just say dark because like maybe this isn't for me. Like
exactly.
But when you bring that comedy part into it, Yeah.
Can I make one final point? This movie is actually funny at times. Like, there
That's
are scenes
hilarious.
in there that I laughed out loud.
Yeah.
Like, when he kills Advocate Benu and there's like a WhatsApp thread of everyone saying rest
Yeah.
in peace, and he just goes, irreplaceable loss, RIP, and he just walks out of the courtroom.
Yeah,
Dude, I
yeah.
laughed out loud. And I think
Oh,
you
yeah.
make a good point about, like, if it's a dark film, no one would watch it. And it made me think, like, why didn't we, like, why is this entertaining in a way, or why don't we feel more strongly about what he's doing? And I think it's because we never see on screen all the terrible things he does. Like the
Yeah.
Cobra attack on Venu happens off screen, right?
That's good.
Even
Yeah.
when he kills Advocate
Mm.
Robin, the camera is focused on just
Him, yes.
Mukundan Unni, right? You don't really see him hitting his
No,
head and dying. You don't see the impact of the
that's
truck
true.
on the kids, so you never really have to engage with just how brutal this guy is in
Yeah.
any scene. Like, he's not holding a dead person in his hand and getting them to sign a thing, right? Like,
No.
it is able to remain a bit comedic by not going into the
Yeah.
actual consequences of what he's doing, and that just allows you maybe to kind of continue watching without being completely repulsed. Because I think you're right. If it was just a dark film where you exposed
Oh.
all of that, I don't think I could have watched this, man.
No, I would have walked out going like, that was extremely dark. I'm never going to see that again. And there's nothing that
Exactly.
I really took out of this. But this one, I
That's
would
right. You'd feel
definitely take
icky.
the you
Yeah.
definitely take the comedy parts out of this because yeah, just like you, man. Like at the start, the first half of this movie, I was going like, this is ridiculous, but this is hilarious what he's
It
doing
is.
here. Like, is he actually for real?
Yeah.
It's just that like deadpan kind of comedy. This guy did
Yes.
excellently. Like it was just like a lot of it was just in his head, and you're like, what are you actually thinking that? Like that's insane. But I was on board, man. The second point you brought up was really good. Like it's they don't really they don't show him doing anything explicitly bad. Like sort of I mentioned,
Yes.
if he was a straight up bad guy and he just had a scene at the start where he just did something despicable,
Yeah.
then you've already set the tone of the movie. Like we don't
Yes.
like this guy. He does horrible things and he's the bad guy.
That's it. That's it.
But yeah, you're right. We don't ever see him do anything really that bad. We just see his actions, like going to people's and giving them forms. The worst thing he
Yes.
does is maybe the fingerprint thing, but even that's physically, it's not that bad, right? He's
No.
not.
And the
It's just
guy's
like
alive and he's like
yeah,
just like a bit unconscious or whatever, but he's going to be
yeah,
okay. It's not like blood is spurting out of him while he's
no,
trying to get the fingerprint or something. It's not too
yeah,
graphic. So you can kind of be
yeah,
like, oh, this is a bit funny and weird. But yeah.
yeah. Even the way he kills, you're right. It's not like he takes like a knife and stabs him to death or does
No,
something
that's right.
maniacal, like American Psycho does with Christian Bale. Like he actually goes and commits bloody
Yes.
murder and stuff like that.
Yes.
But in this one, is not the case. I think that's a really good point. That sort of makes it much easier to digest.
Yes. A
Um,
bit more palatable.
yeah, man, this was an excellent movie. I think we can
Terrific.
definitely agree on that. But just we have to see sort of where does it fall now, man? Where does this fall on your D scale? Which does it? I'm sure it's not in the first half, but where does it sort of rank with your ratings?
Look, man, I mean, this film is dynamite for me. This is unlike anything I've seen before. Like, it's not a perfect film, but it does things that I'd never expected. It kept me on my toes a little bit. I was waiting for a conclusion that never came, and the commitment to its vision. I've never seen something like this before. And then add that with terrific acting, just comedy that is on point. It's
Yeah,
hard for me to give this anything other than Dynamite. It's just a unique experience, and I couldn't recommend it enough to
yeah,
people.
yeah. No, I'm on the same boat, man. It's a very, very high dynamite,
Yeah.
reaching into the sort of dope zone. It's just
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's that good. Like I haven't seen a movie like this. It's
That's
unique.
it.
It's uncomfortable. It's actually artistically
Yes.
it's great like that because it's challenges you as a viewer
Yes.
to sort of appreciate. This is disturbing, but you have to appreciate what they're doing here because it's masterful
Yes.
in every
Yeah.
stroke. Um,
Yes.
Performances were on point. There's enough comedy that I can remember this movie for the comedy itself because it's so good.
Yes.
It's unique, and the fact that it's a debut director, man, just
That's mind
mind
blowing.
blowing. That is insane. Like it's really really good. It's yeah, these movies just continue to impress me, man. Like it's
Man,
definitely
it's
like it's low tone, low budget, focuses on story, character, writing.
yes.
There's
Yes.
no CGI or AI or
No.
superficial elements coming in. It's about character and something that's extremely relatable. So
You get
yeah,
the
man.
basics right. Interesting characters, even if they're not good, just interesting characters and
Yep.
interesting plot. They're the two things you need to make an entertaining film, and this delivers, man.
Yeah, that mixed with some good editing and some good
Good
humor
editing,
and some good character
100%.
development, interesting premise. You got
That's
it.
it.
This movie's it's a very high dynamite for the both of us. This is
Dynamite.
fantastic, man. Really, I'm really happy I watched this movie. This is really one of the better ones. Yeah, man.
Really loved it. And just Malayalam cinema just continues to churn out just different films, right? Like, you never know what you're going in for, and I love that.
Yeah, no. 2022, we saw Talumala, we saw Bisham Parvan, we saw Rorschach. Oh, and this movie, completely different in every single way, but completely
100%.
in their own way. Like, so unique and so, so committed to their cause and so well done and so creative.
That's it. I love it, man.
Yeah.
They're doing amazing things. I'm there for it.
Definitely. No, this has been fantastic, man. Great chatting about this movie, man. Really enjoyed it. And until the next one, man. We'll catch you on the next one.
Looking forward to